Welcome back everyone to Data Science for Everyone. Today we're going to be continuing our discussion on utilizing the canvas with JavaScript. Let's get started. So first off, we're going to be utilizing our index.html again, but we're going to create up a new JavaScript file. So let's call this JavaScript, and we'll do script 2. So we need to go and create up a new script, and we'll do script_2.js. So now we can utilize our same index.html script. Now, interacting with the canvas gets a whole lot more interesting when we can, trigger certain events happening. So we can add interactivity with JavaScript by writing in event handlers that listen for certain user actions and trigger Canvas API methods that update the canvas in response. So let's go on and build up a very basic drawing application. So we have our canvas, we have our script in here, and let's go on and create up an input. And we want to put in this input a range. And we don't need the name. So the type is going to be range. The ID, we're going to do opacity. And we'll do a minimum of 0, a maximum of 1, a value of 1, and a step is equal to 0.1. So what we're actually going to be doing is creating up a drawing application that's going to use the canvas element, and we're going to actually give it a clicker handler, and that handler will listen for clicks on the canvas and call a method that draws a circle in that position. And we're also going to create up a slider, and that's what we're creating up right now is a slider here. So let's also give this a label, and this will be for opacity, and we'll label this opacity. Now, if we went on and took a look at this, this is the old file here. Excuse me. Let's move all of this, the input and everything, into a div tag. And let's also put in here a button, and we'll call this button clear to clear out the range. And let's give it ID is equal to clear. So we have a button. So this will clear up once we've drawn something, we can clear it. We have an input, which is going to be a range slider. And then we're going to have an this label again for opacity here. And let's go on and move our script down here. And this is just for cleanliness here. All right, now if let's see now if anything wants to pop up. Nothing. Oh, here it is. It's down at the bottom here. You can see down here at the bottom that we have a clear button. We have a slider. And actually what we'll do is let me change. I think the reason for this is our canvas is too big. So let's make this 300 by 300, and that way we can actually see it. There we go. So now we'll have this space here where we can draw, and we will be able to should be able to change the opacity. So let's talk a little bit about the file here. So we've added in something new. We've added in a div tag. Now this div tag is an element where we can group together elements in it together and to position them below the canvas. Without the div, they're going to appear at the right of the canvas. So if I get rid of the div. Save this and we go back over and we refresh. Notice it's over here and our canvas is actually over here. All right, and again, we want this below. So we'll put the divs back in there. Let's make sure that when we refresh, it's back underneath. Okay, good. So the first element inside that we have here is the button tag, okay? Now, this creates a clickable element and a button, and any content between the opening and closing tags will appear as the text button. So, we could do something like, this is the clear button. And we go back over here, we refresh. Notice this is the clear button. Okay, so the next thing that we have in here, what we will do though is eventually we will write up a function, a JavaScript function that will use this button specifically, okay, to clear the canvas once we've drawn something on it. Now, the next thing inside is the input element right here. Okay, and this input element doesn't allow child elements, so it doesn't really need a closing tag. Okay, if you notice, it doesn't have a closing tag. Now, it has a bunch of attributes, though, defining functionality. So min here defines the minimum. Max is going to be the maximum of that slider value. And then we also have this value, which is going to give us a starting point. Okay, for the value. So right now, if we go over here, you see that it's at 1 because the max is 1. If you wanted to start it out at 0.5, you could. And notice now it's only half full. So then I'll go and put that back up to 1 because I want to have full opacity whenever we're drawing. Now, this slider then has a range from 0 to 1, and it has increments of 0.1 steps. Again, 1 starts at full opacity, 0 is basically completely clear. Now, the last element is the label element. Now, this applies a label to another element. The for attribute here of the label determines which element that the label should be applied to. Now, its value has to match, this value has to match the ID of another element. In this case, we're assigning the label to the slider by specifying opacity as the target ID. So this, again, will be labeled opacity, which then we can type in the content label. So what good is this label, okay? Well, because of this for attribute, the browser understands that the label and the input are they're associated with each other. Okay, they're related in some way. And certain actions performed on the label, on this label, will apply to the other element. Okay, so for example, if we have maybe a hover element over the label, the input will display as hovered. Okay, now if you click on the label, then the input will get a keyboard focus, okay, such as pressing left or right on the arrow keys will increase or decrease it. And so in our instance, though, we may want to use the mouse click. So let's take one more look at it before we move on with coding everything. So if we refresh it again, we went to 1. Notice we can move this around. Okay, we can click clear. Again, nothing happens because we haven't put any code behind these items yet, but we will. So now that we have the HTML elements in place, let's write up the JavaScript that makes the application interactive. So first we're going to put in some basic declarations. So here we do let canvas is equal to document.query selector here, and we want to grab in the canvas. Then we want our CTX, our context in here, canvas, and we want to get the context. And this is going to be 2D. and then we want the width is equal to canvas dot width. Let height is equal to canvas dot height. Let opacity is equal to 1. So the next thing that we're going to do is we want, when we touch the canvas, okay, when we click on it, it will draw a circle or a dot of some sort. So let's actually create up a function for it to draw that. So function in here, and it'll be draw circle. Parameters, it'll take in an X and a Y. And then let's actually go on and fill the style. So one thing that we had in our previous code, okay, is we had a fill style, begin path, and then for a circle we had arc, and then ctx.fill. So let's go on and do that. ctx.fill style is equal to, and again, before we had something like green, right? And then we had ctx.begin path, and then we had ctx.arc x, y, and we wanted it to kind of start at a radius of 10, start at 0. We had our math.pi multiplied by 2 and false, and then ctx fill. Now the next thing we want is an event listener. Okay, so right now we drew up a function. This is going to be actually a callback function, and we go on and create a canvas.add event listener, and we are listening for click. Okay, so we want to know when we click on something with the mouse. Okay, now here we are going to use an arrow function. So we're listening for some event, and then we want it to draw the circle, e dot offset of x, e dot offset of y. Okay, so now if we go back over, we should be able to refresh this, and I should be able to put in some green dots. Notice clear doesn't work, our opacity doesn't work, it just gives us a bunch of green dots. Okay, so the next thing that we want to be able to do is to link that. So we want our opacity to be here. So we can use an RGB scale to get green, for example. So if we do RGB, and we did something like 0 and 255, 0, for instance. And we go back over and we refresh. Notice they are now green. Okay, they're a bright green. All right, but opacity still doesn't work. Now the reason for this is that we do not have alpha in there. Alpha, if we add in a in here, gives us a fourth argument here. And we can take into account, for example, our opacity. Now, for this instance, it's just going to be 1, okay? And we're not changing anything right now. But, again, we can see it still works. Now, maybe, I don't know, the green is honestly a little offensive to my eyes. So, let's change it up to blue, maybe. Yeah, that's a little bit better, and it actually kind of matches that. It looks a little bit nicer to me. All right, so now we have this opacity, and we haven't been able to change anything about it yet. So let's go on and add that in. Now, another thing also, right, is our clear function, all right, our clear button. So maybe let's do that first, because now it just looks like we have blue chicken pox. So document dot query selector, and we are listening to the clear ID. So notice here our button, the ID is clear. So we do hashtag clear, and we can do add event listener, and we're listening for a click. Okay. And we're going to go on and do ctx dot clear rectangle. And again, it'll be from 0, 0, so from the starting to the width and the height. Okay, so again, clear the whole thing. All right. Now we should be able to go back over. Oops. Oh, something broke real quick. And again, we can know pretty quickly that it is the comma here. So we should now be able to run over here, refresh, give it some chicken pox, right? And then clear. Okay, so it works. Clear. Now we haven't done anything to our opacity yet. So let's go and add in the opacity. So again, we do document dot query selector. And here we want, that's right, you guessed it, opacity. And we're going to add an event listener again. And here we are looking and listening for change. Okay, it's not on a click. And so with this change, we're going to do the opacity is equal to the item that we're grabbing in and the target dot value. All right, and so now let's go over refresh. All right, now let's change the opacity. Notice now they're very light colored, and we can clear it. All right, so there we actually have added in quite a few nice little elements in there to our styling. And so let's go through and talk about each piece of this code in turn, just so that we can have a little bit of closure on what is going on. So we drew up a helper function, okay, called a draw circle. And this function takes in an X and a Y, and it's going to draw a circle at that location. Now, again, we use the same draw path functions that we talked about earlier. And this X and Y is going to determine the circle's center, and it sets it at a radius here of 10 pixels. Okay, so if you wanted bigger dots, you could. You want smaller dots, you can make this number smaller. Now, one key difference that we have here is this right here. Okay, and there we are using the RGBA color instead of the color name like red or blue. So RGBA is a way of defining colors using 4 numbers corresponding to red, green, blue, and the alpha. Now, the first 3 indicate the amount of primary color of light. So each of these values is going to range from 0 to 255, and they combine to produce any color that we might want. Now, setting all 3 to 0 produces black. Setting all to 255 gives us white. Okay. Now, alpha is another way, a word for opacity, and it's going to determine the opaqueness or the transparency of the color, and it's going to range between 0, completely transparent, and 1, completely opaque. Now, in the Canvas API, the RGBA colors use a string, so that's why we have to put this in the backticks with the 4 values separated by commas. Now, we add in our event listener here for click, and this Canvas element is going to add in an event listener, and the handler calls the draw, so this is the handler here, it's going to call the draw circle function that we created, and passing in the offset X and offset Y properties of click. Okay. Now the click event specifically, so E here is for event, and it's going to find the X and the Y from where you clicked on the page. Now, the next two functions that we have here, we have another click event listener here. Okay, so but we are actually attaching it over to the clear button here. And this is going to call the canvas method for the clear React, or for rectangle. Okay, and it's going to put in, again, we can specify even the specific amount that we want to clear. We can maybe do a specific piece or not. Later on, we could even do and create an eraser very similarly. Now, the next thing that we add is to the change event, okay, which is here to change the opacity. And the change event is going to be triggered on the input elements where the value changes. So this handler here is going to get the input element with the e.target, okay? And then we get the element current value with the dot value. So then we can update the opacity variable with this value. Now, because of the draw circle function uses the value opacity, okay, so all the way back up here, okay, as the alpha component of the RGBA color, the new circles will use the latest value set with the opacity slider. So overall, we've created up a little bit more complex function, or a little bit complex Canvas website now. If you guys like this and you want more of this content, please comment, subscribe, and again, hit that like button, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.